our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. A wild day in the legislature today as the session winds down to the end. We'll start tonight's coverage in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which held a public hearing on legislation that would revamp and reorganize the state's ethics code. We reported for the last several weeks on House Bill 227 from Representative Matt Simpson, which aims to simplify the Alabama Ethics Code and reorganize prosecutorial jurisdictions. The bill passed overwhelmingly in the House, but has run into trouble in the Senate as it has drawn opposition from both the Attorney General and the Ethics Commission.
This bill will revamp the ethics laws as they are in Alabama. This is a bill that has come from many years of not just this bill, but many years of work in this building to try to address the ethics laws and make sure the ethics laws make sense. The goal behind it is clarity and to end the confusion.
I hadn't read the sub completely, but got some serious concerns about your bill, and we'll certainly see the substitute that's going to be before the committee. I understand when the chairman's prerogative, we may not be voting. We'll have less than 24 hours to look at that closely. I know the sponsors emailed that out, but that committee did have some good recommendations, but this bill seems to go far beyond those recommendations.
I think, though, that if we're going for clarity, I will just simply say that I'm not sure we have achieved that. This obviously separates some crimes from some civil offenses, but with a big overlap of when one may become the other. And that's what I think is going to be the biggest problem as far as seeking clarity here. I think we've had some good conversations about some ideas on how you get there. Maybe if we had a little bit more time, we could have worked it out, because I think there's some room. There's some room for compromise. There's some room for a middle ground.
The committee did not vote on the bill and could take up substitute legislation tomorrow. That will be the last chance the bill would have to clear committee. The gambling package did not come back up today, and word is it is likely dead for the session. But its large shadow still loomed over other proceedings today. Here's how. A conference committee stalled Senate Bill 219. That is the bill paving the way for a new state-of-the-art agriculture event center in Jefferson County, a project promoted by the Alabama Farmers Federation, better known as ALFA. That led most in the State House to speculate that proponents of the gambling package in the House were retaliating against ALFA for its opposition to the gambling package. Later on in the Senate, the sponsor of that Ag Center bill, Senator Shay Shelnut, led a prolonged filibuster on the Senate floor to slow down business, also in retaliation to House members for delaying his bill. All this led to some sparks flying on the Senate floor.
That Farm Center bill, that was very important to my district. We passed out here. The House changed it. It came back to committee. We had the conference, and all three senators signed out on the conference committee. And only one representative signed out. The other two did not sign out. So that's where we are. That's where I am. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, we just need to pass the budgets and go home, because there's no other House bills, local bills. I'm sorry for you.
I think you're being very selfish and short-sighted. I know it may be something that you want, but we don't always get what we want. This is a deliberative body. It is a democracy. Why don't you take it like a big boy, just like I took mine like a big girl the other day? I said my piece, and I left it alone.
And such as it is in the legislature this late in the session. We'll get back to the Senate in a bit, but it was the House today, working relatively quickly through a calendar of bills to give them final passage. Senate Bill 157 from Senator Arthur Orr would allow school teachers greater flexibility to expel students from the classroom if they are disruptive. But some lawmakers had questions about whether expulsion was the right answer.
What this bill would do would be to authorize teachers to exclude disruptive students under certain circumstances, would provide procedures for returning disruptive students to class, would authorize the principal to suspend a student who has been excluded 3 times in a month, would require boards of education to adopt policies and procedures related to this bill, would provide certain civil and criminal immunity to teachers and to boards, would comply with federal special education law, and it follows the due process bill that Senator Smitherman and Representative Collins sponsored.
When we took God out of school, part of your problem arrived. When you take the paddle out of the hand of the teacher, part of your problem arrived. I have to hear this conversation every single day from my wife because she deals with the discipline in her school. And I tell her every day, you need a resident butt whooper in your school to handle discipline.
Senate Bill 98, also from Orr, aims to beef up public school security by offering local systems the resources and policy needed to better secure schools. Representative Terry Collins carried that bill in the House.
Sets up the school security inspections, doesn't use an A through an F, it uses a color rating, which would be red, green, yellow. It has grants to fund those with the greatest of needs. It has mapping in collaboration with ALEA, Department of Education, and Fire Department, and that's at that upper level. And then it includes our local level in every single school system, changing school security coordinator to district safety coordinator so that we know it's for the whole district. It sets up what qualifications those people would need to have and what their duties would be, and it requires them to annually have a collaboration between their local law enforcement, be it police or sheriff, Department of Education, fire, and emergency management.
Back up to the Senate, the last of the workforce development bills saw final passage there today. House Bill 358 from Representative Anthony Daniels would offer employers tax credit incentives to provide child care and also employees tax credits to make that child care more affordable. House Bill 346 from Representative Cynthia Allman establishes the Workforce Housing Tax Credit, which would tap into federal resources to offer developers incentives to build affordable housing for workers. Senator Chris Elliott carried that bill in the Senate.
You've seen, I'm sure, around Baldwin County, you see Tuscaloosa and Lee and Huntsville and other places where and in Birmingham and areas where the cost of living is just so expensive. And developers can build multifamily housing and charge almost whatever they want. The market is sky high. And so what we're trying to do here is incentivize some developers to come in that will fill a niche in that market and agree that for these credits to provide essentially workforce housing so that we can keep our restaurants open, keep our hotels staffed, and then of course any other industries out there that need this type of housing assistance.
It is providing a critical need to have workforce housing available throughout the state, particularly where tourism is involved. You know, we work very hard, the federal government helps with certain visas that are needed to bring in necessary workforce, particularly in your area, Senator. And being able to house these people is one thing that is, the feds are incentivizing, and these credits will go with those Fed credits to help make these houses available for our workforce.
So all those bills are on their way to the governor's desk. Let's take a look at other notable bills receiving final passage today. Senate Bill 53 from Senator Arthur Orr and Representative Susan DuBose would alter child labor laws to allow teenagers to work after-school jobs for 3 hours a day without consent from the superintendent. Senate Bill 191 from Senator Sam Gavan and Representative Margie Wilcox authorizes the ABC Board to build or buy its own liquor warehouse. Senate Bill 231 from Senator Orr and Representative Scott Stadhagen prohibits state incentive dollars from going to companies who voluntarily allow unions without a vote or without a secret ballot vote. And Senate Bill 238 from Senator Jabo Waggoner and Representative Tim Wadsworth allows for alcohol sales for a selected area of Coleman County slated for a major result. And also receiving final passage today was the general fund budget. It's on its way to Governor Kay Ivey, who says she looks forward to signing it. The Education Trust Fund budget did not receive final passage today. However, it only requires concurrent votes by both chambers tomorrow to go to the governor's desk. Today marked Yom HaShoah in the legislature, the days of remembrance for the Holocaust. The House welcomed leaders from the Jewish community as well as children of Holocaust survivors for a reminder of the importance of keeping the memory alive so it never happens again.
Today is the it's the World Holocaust Remembrance Day on May 7th this year. We have done this here on the floor and recognized that day, I think every year since 2015. You heard Rabbi Kramer give our prayer today, and he spoke about Ruth and her sister, and there's other survivors, including them, who have sat right here on this floor, and we recognize them. Unfortunately, this year, we do not have any survivors here with us today. We still have some left that live in the state of Alabama, but we're losing them each year. But I wanted y'all to know that it's important that we recognize them, and you'll see pictures of survivors, many of whom sat on this floor, and you recognize them.
And I'll speak with two of those leaders about the importance of Yom HaShoah when we come back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Dr. Dan Puckett, Professor of History at Troy University, and Rabbi Scott Kramer. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Professor, I should also mention that you are the chairman of the Alabama Holocaust Remembrance Commission. And y'all had this great ceremony today and brought it to the legislature as well for Yom HaShoah, the Day of Remembrance. Talk about this day and what it means for Alabamians, but really for the world in terms of what we are actually marking with Yom HaShoah.
Well, Yom HaShoah it's the days of remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust, the survivors of the Holocaust, and initially it was included the liberators of those survivors, although in Alabama we have no liberators remaining. So what we do every Yom HaShoah, and it lasts for a week, it's the U.S. Holocaust Museum has said, designated as the Days of Remembrance. Okay. And it falls on different times in the spring on the Jewish calendar. But what we do is we commemorate the Holocaust. We remember the victims. We honor the survivors who were there. And unfortunately, this is the second year in which we've had no survivors attend. We have so few that now aren't able to travel or be out in public. And so what we're doing is at the commemoration today, we had a second generation survivor, Anne Mollengarden. Her father, Dr. Robert May in Birmingham, survived the Holocaust. And so she came and shared his experience to that. So really what we want to do is to honor those who perished and honor the survivors and educate, which is really the main goal of the Alabama Holocaust Commission, is to educate the next generation.
Yeah, and we've got a lot to talk about that. But so, Rabbi, the words "never again" are ring on days like this, and yet it's hard to get those words out without recognizing the fact that October 7th happened. And it was the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. And so we are here doing this, these days of remembrance, and yet that is looming large. What has that been like over these months for the Jewish community, especially as this war has raged on?
It's been incredibly difficult. There isn't one person in a community that doesn't know someone in Israel that is connected with someone that was lost. And we're not talking soldiers, we're talking civilians, we're talking women, children that were slaughtered, mostly at a not only a music festival, but people in their homes.
Peaceful kibbutzim.
Peaceful kibbutzim, correct. There are no words to explain what tragedy this is, and the fact that there's still over probably 90 hostages still alive. We don't know how many, and all we want to do is bring them home.
Right.
Because, you know, we can't bring back those that were murdered in the Holocaust. And now that we're going into a time period where we don't even have any survivors left. In Alabama, we may have 4 or 5 survivors. None of them could make it today to this event. This event always honored the survivors, and we got to sit with them and hear their stories. And to be at a time where we can't hear their stories anymore is unconscionable to me.
I'm curious, and I want to come to you in a second, Dan, but I'm curious about, you know, your congregation, your temple. You know, what has it been like as these protests have gotten really out of control on many college campuses? And it may have started as an anti-war protest, but it's really gotten to where it pretty clearly anti-Semitic undertones, Jew hatred, to be quite frank. So how difficult has it been for the Jewish community to see this live on TV, something we've really never seen before?
Yeah. You know, I get asked this a lot. You know, one can be pro-Israel and still not like some of the policies that that the government of Israel does. And I think, but to make the environment in this country that my grandfather came from Russia, to be in a country where he doesn't have to fear, and here we are at the other end of the 3rd generation, and we're fearing walking on a campus. How unconscionable is that? And most of my congregants feel that.
Yeah.
You know, especially those that have kids in college. We had a teacher at Troy that now teaches at UCLA, and he told me about what was going on there.
Wow.
And how they had to close down their school because mostly he teaches at a Jewish day school, and they're on campus. And he sees these protesters. He has sympathy for what they're protesting, but not their anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Well, because you're in academia, and we've been fortunate that these large-scale protests have not come to Alabama. I think there's pretty good reason for that. But the question I keep getting, and that keeps getting tossed around on podcasts and it just sort of on Twitter and everything, is how did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where there's such a disconnect between maybe this generation of students or whatever that it just shocks the system to see such large-scale pro-Palestinian, in many ways anti-Jewish protest? Is there any discussion within academia like, goodness, how did we get here?
There is, and there's no good answer for this. You know, I think, first of all, we need to take a step back and put it in context that with these protests, anti-Semitism is front and center. But this is not Nazi Germany. This is not the 1930s. Sure. This is not the 1940s of what's going on. Now, that's not to minimize the danger that many of the Jewish students at places like UCLA or up in the Northeast suffer. But it is an outspoken minority that's doing this, and one that I think has been aided and abetted by social media. by an unregulated type of social media. You see this on what was Twitter, X. You see this on Instagram. You see this on so many different social media platforms that we're connected, and these groups can now connect in ways that, well, frankly, they couldn't generations ago. So I don't think anti-Semitism has ever left. It's always been a part of American life, but I think it has been minimized for the majority of Americans. And I think what we're seeing here is a very loud, small minority who is taking advantage of this. And those who are protesting the war are, I'm not sure if they know really what they're advocating,
I would agree with that.
especially the very young.
Yeah, and you mentioned social media because a lot of it seems very performative, right? Yes. Like there's some social cachet in being in solidarity in these encampments and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's lots of reasons, I guess, behind it. It was very well stated. It's really just tough to answer. But another follow-up on that, and maybe for both of you, is this: where do we go from here? Whether it's on college campuses, because if I would have told you that 5 years ago, 3 years ago, that I would be asking you about the rampant anti-Semitism problem in America, I would have laughed. That's not something I thought was even possible. But here we are. And so, given where we are, maybe we haven't fully dissected it. Talk about where we go from here to make sure it doesn't happen again and to make sure that people are properly educated. Does the Holocaust Commission and days like this play a big role in making sure people understand what they're actually talking about, the history? I'll start with you. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it does. One of the things that we're tasked with the Alabama Holocaust Commission is promoting Holocaust education across the board, and also addressing anti-Semitism, which is part. That was why the Holocaust occurred. So, what we have to do, and there really is no definitive answer. We're all struggling with how do we address this, but education has to be the key. It really, you can't just shut down speech. I mean, the protests, they should be protected by the freedom of speech, provided that doesn't cross into advocating violence on a minority. But it's education. It's reaching the young. It's reaching the uninformed, or those who can't discern what is true versus what's not. There's just, as we were talking about before, there really is no real way that we can address this. We're all still reeling from October 7th, so trying to find what we should do. We're all working.
We're still in the fog of it, really.
We really are.
So there is a time for dialogue. I'm not sure that people are really willing to listen right now. I was asked to talk at an interseminary conference several years ago, Muslims, Christians, and we wanted to teach each other about our experiences in life. And I chose to speak about hate. And I used some biblical passages, and the conclusion I came to is, it's really hard to hate somebody that you know. It's easy to just say, well, I don't like that group or those people, because you don't know anything about them, So I advocate that we try and get to know as many people as we can. And I had an imam that came up to me afterwards, gave me a big hug, and he said, that's exactly what we need to do.
Wow.
We need to get to know each other. So yes, we do need to engage in dialogue. We need to hear each other's stories and not cut them off. Your story is your story. How it affects you is how it affects you. Now listen to mine. And now how can we come together? How we got here, I think a lot of ignorance got us here. I don't think people really understand what Israel is and what it's about, what it stands for. But it is the only place in the world that Jews can go to feel free, to feel unhated. And yet, this is what happens.
Well said, and very timely, and I really appreciate y'all taking your time after all the events of today to come on and help our viewers understand all this. And again, just thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the online video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at the same time with more coverage of the Alabama Legislature here on APT. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.